with a haunting whistle and a deadly scowl for a few dollars. More 1965 cemented the spaghetti western as a global phenomenon. It brought us the coolest bounty hunters in cinema history, figures of unshakable power who defined masculinity for decades, yet the rugged invincibility we saw on screen was nothing but a mirage. Once the dust settled on the prairie, the cast faced a reality far harsher than the Wild West, ravaged by poverty, eaten away by aggressive cancers, and lost to tragic accidents. Today, we open the file on the deceased stars of this legendary sequel, uncovering the painful price they paid for their immortality. Lee Van Cleef joined the film 1965 as Colin Douglas Mortimer, the coolest man in the West, whose steely gaze hid a broken body and a career resurrected from the ashes. Lee Van Cleef was 40 years old when he donned the black suit, but he was already a man defeated by life. Before this role, his career was dead. A horrific car accident in 1958 had shattered his knee and cost him the tip of his finger, leaving him in chronic, agonizing pain that led to a dependency on alcohol and painkillers. When Sergio Leone found him, Van Cleef wasn't acting, he was working as a freelance house painter in Los Angeles to pay off mounting debts, believing his Hollywood dream was over. His salary for a few dollars more was a lifeline, approximately $17,000, roughly $160,000 today. While this seems modest compared to Clint Eastwood's $50,000 check for Van Cleef, it was a fortune that pulled him out of poverty. However, the price of his cool persona was steep. He spent the rest of his life battling severe heart disease and the physical toll of his stunts, hiding his limp and his suffering from the camera. He died of a heart attack on December 16, 1989, at the age of 64. He left behind a net worth of roughly $2 million, a fortune earned entirely in the second half of his life, proving that he was indeed the man who came back. Fun fact: he was so desperate for work that when Leone approached him, Van Cleef didn't ask about the script. He only asked if the production would pay his overdue phone bill so he could call his agent. Mortimer was a man of honor hunting a bounty, but his target was a madman played by a brilliant actor whose real-life hatred for the movie was only matched by his tragic political obsession. Gian Maria Volonté joined the film 1965 as El Indio, the drug-addicted villain whose on-screen madness was a reflection of a tortured political soul. Gian Maria Volonté was 32 when he played El Indio, delivering one of the most terrifying performances in Western history. In Italy, Volonté was already a respected theater actor, commanding a salary higher than the American imports, estimated at $25,000 to $30,000. Yet the irony was bitter. Volonté despised Westerns. He considered them capitalist trash and only accepted the role for the money to fund his radical left-wing theater productions. The contrast was stark. On screen, he played a greedy bandit. Off-screen, he was a communist intellectual who gave away his wealth. His life was a storm of nervous breakdowns and intense depression, fueled by a perfectionism that bordered on self-destruction. He refused to be a commercial star, rejecting Hollywood offers that could have made him millions. His end was poetic and lonely. He died of a heart attack on December 6, 1994, at age 61, while filming in Greece. He died on the cold floor of a hotel room, leaving behind a legacy of artistic integrity, but a modest estate of under $1 million, having spent his fortune on political causes rather than personal luxury. Fun fact: he did not speak a word of English during filming. He memorized his lines phonetically or spoke in Italian, requiring him to be completely dubbed in post-production, even in his native language releases. El Indio was crazy, but the hunchback in his gang was played by a man who was genuinely clinically insane, a chaotic force of nature who terrorized directors for a paycheck. Klaus Kinski joined the film 1965 as Juan Wild, the hunchback, the eccentric psychopath whose on-screen twitching was not acting but a symptom of a life in chaos. Klaus Kinski was 39 when he played the hunchbacked gunslinger. Kinski was infamous for only working for money, demanding cash up front. For this supporting role, he likely extorted a fee of $5,000 to $8,000 cash, a significant sum for a few weeks of work in 1965. However, Kinski squandered every cent he ever earned on luxury cars, women, and outbursts of excess. He was a man diagnosed with psychopathy in the 1950s, spending time in psychiatric institutions. His life was a horror story of abusing his family and terrorizing film crews. He hated, for a few dollars more, calling Sergio Leone a moron and only showing up to set if the check cleared. Despite appearing in over 130 films and earning millions over his lifetime, he died nearly broke due to his lavish manic lifestyle. He passed away from a heart attack on November 23, 1991, at age 65, alone in his California home. His ashes were scattered in the Pacific Ocean, leaving behind no inheritance, only a legacy of fear and brilliance. Fun fact: he was not actually a hunchback. He created the physical deformity himself, using a painful wooden brace he wore under his coat, enduring weeks of back spasms just to make the character look more reptilian. The hunchback was dangerous, but the muscle of the gang was played by a man who didn't need to act tough. He was a real-life butcher who could crush a skull with his bare hands. Mario Brega joined the film 1965 as Nino, the brutal enforcer whose imposing size hid a heart that eventually collapsed under its own weight. Mario Brega at 42 was the ultimate heavy of Italian cinema. Before acting, he was a literal butcher in Rome, a man who worked with knives and blood daily. His salary for a few dollars more was standard for an Italian character actor, likely a weekly rate of $1,000, totaling perhaps $6,000 for the film. While he wasn't paid star wages, he was Leone's lucky charm, appearing in all $3 films. Brega's tragedy was physical. He was a man of immense appetites for food, for cigarettes, and for life. This gluttony took a toll. He suffered from severe diabetes and heart issues for decades, eating himself to death while playing the tough guy on screen. He collapsed and died of a heart attack on July 23, 1994, at the age of 71, in the same Roman neighborhood where he once sold meat. He left behind a modest estate of $500 and $1,000, a working-class fortune, for a man who became the face of Italian grit. Fun fact: he was so intimidating that during an argument on a different set, he punched a fellow actor and knocked him out cold. Sergio Leone loved this volatile energy and hired him specifically because he terrified the other extras. Nino provided the muscle, but the stunts were coordinated by a man who played a gang member on screen while secretly keeping the stars alive behind the scenes. Benito Stefanelli joined the film 1965 as Luke Huey, the invisible warrior who took the hits for the stars and died with a broken body. Benito Stefanelli was 37 and served as both a gang member Huey and the production's stunt coordinator. He was Clint Eastwood's stunt double and Sergio Leone's translator. Despite holding 3 jobs on set, his pay was a flat fee estimated at $3,000 to $5,000 total. He was the unsung hero who taught the Americans how to handle European weapons and choreographed the violent deaths. The tragedy of Stefanelli's life was the silence of his pain. In the 1960s, safety regulations were non-existent. He threw himself off roofs and horses with zero padding, accumulating injuries that plagued him with chronic arthritis and agony in his later years. He never sought fame content to be the man dying in the background. He passed away on December 18, 1999, at the age of 71. He died quietly, leaving behind a net worth of under $500, a humble sum for the man who essentially built the action style of the spaghetti western genre with his own blood and bone. Fun fact: he holds a unique and morbid record. He is the only actor to be killed on screen in all 3 films of the Dollars trilogy, usually dying by the gun of Clint Eastwood or Lee Van Cleef. The stuntman took the falls, but our next gang member was a Spanish legend who played a bandit in over 150 westerns, yet ended his life fighting to preserve the very desert where these movies were filmed. Aldo Sambrell joined the film 1965 as Cuchillo, the king of the Spanish extras who built a cinematic empire in the desert only to watch it crumble into dust. Aldo Sambrell was the definitive face of the spaghetti western bandit, appearing in over 150 films of the genre. At the time of filming For a Few Dollars More, he was a 34-year-old local Spanish actor hired for his rugged looks and ability to ride a horse. His pay was calculated on a daily basis standard for the Almeria location, shoots earning him approximately $50 per day. While the film grossed millions worldwide, Sambrell's earnings were purely subsistence level, forcing him to work constantly to make a living. However, his tragedy was not just financial, but cultural. He dedicated his life and his meager savings to buying and preserving the actual Western sets in Almeria, turning them into a tourist attraction to save the history of cinema. He suffered 3 strokes in his later years, which slowly robbed him of his physical strength, the very tool of his trade. He died on July 10, 2010 in Alicante, Spain, at the age of 79. He left behind a modest estate tied almost entirely to the crumbling movie sets he loved more than money, a guardian of a ghost town that Hollywood had long abandoned. Fun fact: before becoming an actor, he was a professional footballer who played for Monterrey in Mexico, but a singing career and eventually acting took him away from the pitch and onto a saddle. Cuchillo was a survivor, but his fellow gang member was played by a man known in the industry as the man who died 1,000 deaths, whose body was a roadmap of on-set injuries. Frank Brania joined the film 1965 as Blackie, the relentless henchman who accepted physical agony as the price for his small slice of immortality. Frank Brania was a 31-year-old former shepherd and miner who found his way into films because he was tough enough to take a punch. And for a few dollars more, he played Blackie, another disposable member of El Indio's gang. His compensation was minimal, a flat weekly fee of roughly $200, which barely covered the medical costs of his career. Brania didn't just act, he performed stunts that no sane person would accept today without safety equipment. Over a career spanning 170 films, he broke countless bones and suffered chronic pain, treating his body as a rental vehicle for the director's vision. He never achieved the fame of the stars he fought, remaining a working-class hero of the industry. The tragedy of his life was the sheer physical toll. He spent his retirement managing the agony of a lifetime of falls and crashes. He died on February 13, 2012 in Madrid at the age of 77. He left behind a legacy of grit, but a net worth of under $400 to humble sum for a man who claimed to have been killed on screen more times than any other actor in Spanish history. Fun fact: he kept a detailed diary of his on-screen deaths and claimed the final count was over 160 fatal scenes, ranging from hangings to shootings and arrows. Blackie was a rugged brawler, but the next member of the gang was a silent, menacing presence, played by an actor who spent his life trapped behind a face that directors found too perfect for villainy. Antonio Molino Rojo joined the film 1965 as Frisco, the silent threat whose career was defined by being the face of danger without a voice. Antonio Molino Rojo was 39 when he joined the production as Frisco. Like his compatriots, he was a Spanish character actor utilized for his stern, imposing facial features. His salary was strictly scale, earning perhaps $500 for the entire production, with no rights to residuals. While Clint Eastwood became a millionaire from these films, Molino Rojo remained a day laborer of the arts, hopping from one co-production to another just to maintain a middle-class existence. He appeared in all but one of Sergio Leone's westerns, yet he remained virtually anonymous to the public. His personal tragedy was the stifling box of typecasting. He was a gentleman in real life who was forever doomed to play sadistic henchmen or corrupt officials. He retired quietly when the Western genre died, fading into a private life that was completely detached from the glamour of cinema. He passed away on November 2, 2011 in Barcelona at the age of 85. He died of natural causes, leaving behind a modest estate and a filmography of over 90 roles where he rarely got to be the hero. Fun fact: despite his villainous typecasting in westerns, he actually started his career playing distinguished military officers in Spanish dramas, a stark contrast to the dirty bandits he became famous for. Frisco was menacing, but the gang also included a German actor with a skeletal, haunting visage that made him unforgettable, even if his paycheck was forgettable. Werner Aberlat joined the film 1965 as Slim, the living specter of the gang whose terrifying appearance masked a surprising talent for children's comedy. Werner Aberlat was 41 years old when he played Slim, a gang member instantly recognizable by his gaunt face and piercing eyes. As a German actor cast due to the film's international co-production funding requirements, his salary was paid by the German distributors, likely a fixed fee of around 10,000 Deutsche Marks approx. $2,500 at the time. While his unique look made him perfect for horror movies and westerns, it also limited his range, trapping him in roles that required him to be scary rather than human. He worked consistently, but never broke through to leading man status or significant wealth. The irony of his career lies in his voice. While his face terrified adults, his voice delighted children in his native Germany for decades. He passed away on August 24, 1997 in Munich at the age of 73. He died without international fanfare, leaving behind a comfortable but modest inheritance, a man who was visually iconic, yet personally unknown to the millions who watched him. Fun fact. In a jarring contrast to his scary on-screen persona, he provided the German dubbing voice for the chaotic and lovable Gonzo in The Muppet Show, showcasing a comedic range the Westerns never let him use. Slim was a terrifying figure, but the gang needed one final member to round out its numbers, played by a Greek actor who found himself lost in the American West by way of Italy. Panos Papadopoulos joined the film 1965 as Sancho Perez, the international drifter who found a home in the gang but never found fame in the world. Panos Papadopoulos was 45 years old when he played Sancho Perez. Born in Greece but working primarily in the German film industry, he was another casting choice dictated by the complex financing of European co-productions. His pay was minimal, a standard supporting fee of roughly $2,000, barely enough to cover his travel and living expenses during the shoot. He represents the true soldier of fortune, actor of the 1960s, men of undefined ethnicity who could play Mexicans, Turks, or Italians, depending on what the script demanded. His tragedy was one of displacement. He was a man without a cinematic country, drifting between genres and nations without ever establishing a lasting star identity. He continued to work in minor roles for decades, his contribution to cinema substantial in volume, but negligible in recognition. He died on February 18, 2001 in Munich at the age of 80. He suffered a fatal heart attack, leaving behind a legacy as a reliable background player who helped build the myth of the West without ever reaping its rewards. Fun fact: he was often credited as simply Panos, to make his name easier for international audiences to digest, stripping him of his full heritage for the sake of a movie poster. The gang was a collection of hardened killers, but in the desolate landscape, the heroes encounter a figure of pure eccentricity, an insane old man living by the train tracks who hates the very sound of progress. Joseph Egger joined the film 1965 as the Old Prophet, the eccentric hermit whose hatred for trains provided the film's most memorable comedic relief, masking the final days of a dying man. Joseph Egger was 76 years old when he stood in the dusty sets of Almeria, a veteran of the Austrian stage who had become Sergio Leone's favorite Lucky Charm. Despite his crucial role in establishing the unique surreal tone of the movie, Egger was paid a pittance compared to the American stars. While Clint Eastwood walked away with $50,000 in a Ferrari, Egger's compensation for his supporting role was a flat fee estimated at merely $1,500. This disparity highlights the brutal hierarchy of 1960s co-productions. The local European talent provided the soul of the film for breadcrumbs, while the imports took the cake. The tragedy of Joseph Egger is that he was literally performing on his deathbed. During filming, he was already frail and suffering from severe heart complications, yet he mustered the energy to scream and rant for the camera, hiding his physical agony behind a mask of senile comedy. He never saw the finished masterpiece that immortalized him. He died on August 29, 1966, just months after filming wrapped at the age of 77. He passed away in Gablitz, Austria, leaving behind a modest estate of under $100,000 but a legacy as the grandfather of the spaghetti western grotesque style. Fun fact: he appeared in the first two films of the Dollars trilogy as different characters, the Coffin Maker and the Prophet, But Leone liked him so much he didn't care about continuity, he just wanted Egger's face on screen. The prophet hated the trains, but he had to rely on the station clerk to survive a character played by a prolific Spanish actor who spent his life as the perfect sidekick, but never the hero. Roberto Camardiel joined the film 1965 as the Tucumcari station clerk, the bumbling comedic partner whose prolific career hit a life of relentless low-paid grinding. Roberto Camardiel was 48 years old when he played the station clerk, bringing a theatrical warmth to the cold, violent world of the film. A staple of the Spanish theater, Camardiel was hired on a standard day-player contract for the production. His pay was calculated at the local union rate, earning him approximately $40 per day, totaling perhaps $1,000 for his contribution to a film that is now culturally priceless. While the movie became a global phenomenon, Camardiel saw zero residuals, a common injustice for European character actors of that era. He worked himself into the ground to maintain a middle-class life, appearing in over 150 films, often accepting roles that mocked his rotund physique. His private life was marked by the physical toll of this constant work. His heavy frame and the grueling heat of filming locations eventually wore down his health. He suffered from severe bone degradation and complications from fractures in his later years. He died on November 7, 1986, at the age of 68 in Zaragoza, Spain. He left behind a simple estate, valued at roughly $300, the savings of a man who spent decades making others shine while he stood in the shadows. Fun fact. Before cinema, he was a respected theater director and actually directed several plays, proving his artistic mind was far sharper than the foolish characters he was forced to play for money. The station clerk managed the rails, but in the dark cells of the local prison, another character waited, a carpenter played by a man from an Italian acting dynasty who died in relative obscurity. Dante Maggio joined the film 1965 as the carpenter in Cell, the inmate whose brief interaction with El Indio added a layer of gritty realism to the villain's escape. Dante Maggio was 56 years old when he appeared as the carpenter. He came from the legendary Maggio family of Neapolitan actors, yet in the hierarchy of cinema, he was often relegated to the background. For his small but memorable role in For a Few Dollars More, his salary was negligible, a token fee common in Italian cinema for friends of the director, estimated at around 500,000 lira, approximately $800 at the time. While his brother Beniamino Maggio was a star of the revue, Dante struggled to carve out his own lucrative identity, often living paycheck to paycheck in the volatile Roman film industry. His tragedy was one of unfulfilled potential. Despite his immense talent and famous surname, he never broke through to the wealth that his peers achieved. He lived a quiet, somewhat chaotic life, typical of the Roman bohemians of the era. He passed away on March 3, 1992, in Rome at the age of 83. He died of natural causes, but he died with a net worth that was virtually non-existent, leaving behind only the echo of his voice in some of Italy's greatest films. Fun fact. He was famously undisciplined on set, often improvising lines in heavy Neapolitan dialect that even the Italian directors couldn't fully understand, forcing them to dub him into standard Italian later. The carpenter was stuck in a cell, but out on the open rails, a carpetbagger was about to learn a hard lesson in manners from colleague Mortimer, played by an actor who outlived them all. Jesus Guzman joined the film 1965 as the carpetbagger on Train, the arrogant traveler whose humiliation set the tone for the hero, played by a man who survived nearly a century. Jesus Guzman was 39 years old when he played the man who insults Lee Van Cleef on the train. As a Spanish supporting actor, his role was filmed in a day or two. His compensation reflects the disposable nature of extras. In the 60s, he was likely paid a flat rate of $50 for the scene. It is a cruel irony that for the price of a nice dinner, he became part of cinema history. Guzman's life was a marathon of survival. He appeared in over 150 films and television shows, witnessing the rise and fall of the spaghetti western genre, the death of Franco, and the modernization of Spain. While he never became rich, his estimated net worth never exceeded $5,000. He possessed a wealth of time. His tragedy was the burden of longevity. He watched every single one of his friends and co-stars from this film die one by one, leaving him as the last living witness to the production. He finally passed away very recently on October 16, 2023, at the incredible age of 97. He was one of the oldest working actors in history, performing well into his 90s just to feel alive. Fun fact: he became a household name in Spain, not for his movies, but for playing the lovable postman Braulio in the hit TV series Crónicas de un Pueblo, a role that finally gave him the fame he deserved in his 40s. The traveler moved on, but in the town of Tucumcari, the saloon keeper watched the violence unfold, played by a man whose imposing size hid the soul of a frustrated artist. Ricardo Palacios joined the film 1965 as the Tucumcari saloon keeper, the heavy-set barkeep who represented the atmosphere of the lawless West. Ricardo Palacios was just 25 years old when he played the saloon keeper, though his heavy build made him appear much older. He was a staple of the genre, his size making him the perfect, imposing extra. His salary for the film was strictly scale, approximately $100–200 for the week of shooting. However, Palacios was not just a brute for hire. He was an intellectual trapped in a character actor's body. He spent his life trying to be taken seriously as a director and writer, struggling against a system that only wanted him to play bartenders and bandits. He eventually managed to direct a few films, but they were low budget and largely ignored a source of lifelong frustration. His physical health was his ultimate tragedy. His weight, which got him hired, eventually caused severe cardiovascular issues. He died on February 11, 2015 in Madrid at the age of 74. He passed away from heart failure, leaving behind a modest estate of roughly $600,000, an artist who spent his life serving drinks to fake cowboys while dreaming of making his own art. Fun fact: he directed the 1982 film Buitres sobre la ciudad, trying to revive the Western genre long after it had died, proving his undying love for the cowboys that gave him a career. The saloon was lawless, but the town technically had a sheriff, though he was played by a man who spent his life pretending to have authority he never actually possessed. Tomás Blanco joined the film 1965 as the Tucumcari sheriff, the ineffective lawman whose badge was nothing more than a prop in a world ruled by bounty hunters. Tomás Blanco was 55 years old when he donned the sheriff's star. A distinguished-looking Spanish actor with a military background, Blanco was constantly typecast as officers, officials, and sheriffs. For a few dollars more, his pay was a respectable supporting fee for a Spanish production estimated at $2,000. Despite his authoritative presence, his character is impotent against the film's anti-heroes, a reflection of his own career where he played powerful men who were actually subservient to the script's stars. Blanco's private life was disciplined and quiet, avoiding the excesses of the industry. However, he fell victim to the erasure of time. By the time he died on July 16, 1990, at the age of 79, the Spanish film industry had moved on, and he was largely forgotten by the public. He died of natural causes in Madrid, leaving behind a net worth of roughly $400,000, a soldier of cinema who followed orders until the very end. Fun fact: before becoming an actor, he was a genuine soldier in the Spanish Legion, which is why he wore a uniform with such natural ease. He wasn't acting, he was remembering. The sheriff tried to keep order, but the true law of this universe was dictated by the man behind the camera, a visionary director whose obsession with detail created a masterpiece, but whose own heart couldn't handle the pressure of his genius. Sergio Leone joined the film 1965 as the whistling bounty hunter, the visionary puppet master who provided the voice of death while his own heart slowly failed him under the weight of his genius. Sergio Leone was 36 years old when he directed For a Few Dollars More, but he also stepped behind the microphone to provide the haunting, nameless whistling that signals the approach of death in the soundtrack. While he was the director, his financial situation was precarious. He was entangled in a massive lawsuit with Akira Kurosawa over his previous film, putting his entire career on the line. For this film, he He paid himself a director's fee of approximately $50,000, a significant sum, but he gambled nearly all of it back into the production values to create his vision. Leone was a man of excess, obsessed with food perfection and cinema, which ravaged his body. He famously refused heart surgery because he was too busy planning his next masterpiece. The tragedy of Leone is that his heart couldn't keep pace with his ambition. He died of a massive heart attack on April 30th, 1989, at the age of 60, while preparing a film about the siege of Leningrad that would have been his magnum opus. He left behind a net worth estimated at $10 million of fortune, built on the very genre he reinvented, yet he died before he could tell his final greatest story. Fun fact: he recorded the whistling track himself because he couldn't find a professional whistler who sounded arrogant enough to match the character of Manco. The director provided the sound of doom, but the catalyst for the entire film's bloodshed was a silent, ethereal beauty played by a woman whose real-life end was the definition of solitude. Rosemary Dexter joined the film 1965 as Mortimer's sister, the silent victim whose tragic suicide on screen foreshadowed her own lonely, heartbreaking demise in reality. Rosemary Dexter was just 21 years old when she played the pivotal role of the sister who kills herself to avoid assault. Her haunting beauty launched the entire revenge plot, yet her compensation for this non-speaking cameo was negligible, a day player rate of approximately $200. Despite her stunning looks leading to a career in Italian cinema, she never achieved the financial security or international stardom of her peers. She eventually retired from acting, fading completely into anonymity in the late 1970s. The true horror of her life was revealed in her death. She passed away in her villa in Recanati, Italy, around September 8, 2010, at the age of 66, but her body was not discovered until days later. She had been dead for some time, completely alone, with no one checking on her. She left behind a modest estate of under $500,000, but the image of the woman who inspired Colin Mortimer's lifelong quest for justice, dying in absolute isolation, is a cruel irony that no scriptwriter could invent. Fun fact: she was actually of British and Burmese descent, and her exotic look was often exploited by European directors who cast her solely for her appearance rather than her acting ability. She died on screen to protect her honor, leaving behind a grieving brother and a husband played by a rising star whose life was stolen by a biological time bomb. Peter Lee Lawrence joined the film 1965 as Mortimer's brother-in-law, the handsome groom whose fleeting moment of happiness masked a terrifying ticking clock inside his own head. Peter Lee Lawrence, born Karl Heirenbach, was only 21 years old when he played the doomed husband in the flashback sequence. At the time, he was an extra earning roughly $30 a day. However, his piercing green eyes and blonde hair soon made him a leading man in the spaghetti western genre, where he eventually commanded salaries of $10,000 per film, a massive leap from his humble beginnings. He was dubbed the James Dean of spaghetti westerns, young, beautiful, and destined for greatness, but destiny had a cruel twist. Just as he reached the peak of his fame in 1974, he began suffering from severe headaches. It was a glioblastoma, an aggressive brain tumor. He died on April 20, 1974, at the painfully young age of 30. He left behind a wife, a young son, and a growing fortune estimated at $1 million that he never got to spend. His career was a shooting star that burned out instantly, leaving audiences wondering what kind of legend he would have become if his brain hadn't betrayed him. Fun fact: to hide his German heritage and appeal to American audiences, producers forced him to change his name to Peter Lee Lawrence, and he spent his short career answering to a name that wasn't his. The young lovers perished in the flashback, but back in the saloon, a card player watched the events unfold, played by a man who was secretly studying every camera angle to become a master of crime cinema. Fernando de Leo joined the film 1965 as the cigar-smoking card player, the silent gambler who was actually a cinematic genius, biding his time before revolutionizing Italian film. At 33, Fernando de Leo appeared briefly as a card player, a blink-and-you'll-miss-it cameo. At this stage in his life, he was a screenwriter and assistant, likely paid nothing or a token $50 for the appearance as a favor to Leone. He was not an actor. He was a student of violence. Di Leo would go on to become the master of poliziotteschi, Italian crime films, directing gritty masterpieces that influenced Quentin Tarantino. Despite his later cult success, Di Leo never became wealthy. He worked in the trenches of low-budget exploitation cinema, creating art on a shoestring. His tragedy was the slow erosion of his legacy during his lifetime. By the late 80s, his films were forgotten, and he struggled with health issues that forced him into early retirement. He died on December 1, 2003 at the age of 71. He passed away largely underappreciated by the mainstream critics who once scorned his violent movies, leaving behind a cult legacy, but a modest net worth of roughly $800,000, never seeing the massive resurgence of interest in his work that occurred just years after his death. Fun fact: Quentin Tarantino explicitly cited Di Leo as a major influence, yet Di Leo died just before he could have walked the red carpet as a rediscovered legend. The card player observed the game, but the man holding the worst hand was a major villain played by an actor whose on-screen toughness hid a depression so deep it eventually consumed him. Luigi Pistilli joined the film 1965 as Groggy, the rugged outlaw whose hardened exterior crumbled in real life under the weight of a devastating mental illness. Luigi Pistilli was 36 when he played Groggy, a key member of El Indio's gang. A respected stage actor, his salary was solid for a supporting role, estimated at $5,000 for the film. He was one of the few actors to appear in Good, Bad, and Ugly, as well cementing his face in Western lore. However, the man who played tough killers was incredibly fragile. Pistilli suffered from severe clinical depression for decades, a battle he fought in silence while projecting strength on camera. The final blow came in 1996 when a theater production he was starring in was harshly criticized by critics and eventually canceled. The humiliation broke him. On April 21, 1996, at the age of 66, just hours before he was scheduled to appear on stage for a final curtain call, he hanged himself in his Milan apartment. He left behind a suicide note apologizing for his failure, a heartbreaking end for a man who had succeeded in becoming a cinema icon. He left in a state of roughly $1 million, but no amount of money could silence the voices that told him he wasn't good enough. Fun fact: he was widely considered one of the best actors in Italy to perform the works of Bertolt Brecht, possessing an intellectual depth that made his cowboy roles seem like child's play to him. Groggy chose to end his own life, but the final member of our list met his end in a duel played by a working-class actor who fought until the very last frame. José Canalejas joined the film 1965 as Chico, the scar-faced bandit who lived and died by the sword of the cinema fading away as the genre disappeared. José Canalejas was 40 years old when he played Chico, a gang member involved in the final shootout. With his distinct scar and menacing look, he was the perfect villain. His pay was the standard Spanish union rate, roughly $1,500 for the production. Canalejas was the definition of a blue-collar actor. He appeared in virtually every spaghetti western filmed in Spain, accumulating over 100 credits. He never became a star. He was the reliable antagonist who made the heroes look good. As the western genre faded, so did his career. He transitioned to directing dubbing for films, working behind the scenes to stay employed. He died on May 1, 2015 at the age of 90 at his home in Madrid. Unlike the dramatic exits of his co-stars, his death was a quiet conclusion to a long, hard-working life. He left behind a net worth of roughly $500,000, the savings of a man who spent 50 years dying on dusty sets so that we could be entertained. Fun fact: he was the son of a famous violinist, and despite his rough appearance on screen, he was a classically trained musician who often played guitar on set to entertain the crew between takes. It's bittersweet looking back at the cast of For a Few Dollars More. Though time has passed and some stars have left us, their legacy remains timeless on screen. Which story shocked or touched you the most? Let us know in the comments below. Please like and subscribe to help us keep these memories alive. Thanks for watching.